And then in the school system, it's incorporating not just Holocaust education, but Holocaust education as an example of where anti-Semitism can lead.
Precise. I mean, Holocaust education, we all know, is essential. There's a great virtue in teaching it. There are so many lessons in the Holocaust about the depths of inhumanity, the process from dehumanization to destruction. It needs to be taught, but it's got to be taught correctly, and it has to be positioned within the broader study of anti-Semitism. Otherwise, it consigns Holocaust history to ancient history in Europe, which seems irrelevant to students today. They need to understand anti-Semitism in the here and now, how it presents and what it's doing to our society.
In terms of immigration, this has been a big issue. You know, when we said to Sky News viewers, contact us with your ideas, a lot of those ideas were kind of deport the violent criminals who are anti-Semitic. Now, in many cases, they can't be deported because they're Australian citizens. But some of the outcomes here are about potentially amending the Migration Act to ensure that anti-Semitic conduct is grounds to both reject a new visa or cancel an existing one. Take us through that.
Well, look, there's no reason why someone who exhibits anti-Semitic behaviour, prejudice, expresses support for terrorism and the destruction of the Jewish people should pass a character test for migration to Australia. I mean, anyone that has this mindset is a danger to our national security and a danger to our communities. And we would effectively be, on the one hand, trying to lessen and ameliorate the problem of anti-Semitism, on the other hand, deepening it by importing people to this country that harbour such prejudice. So we want to ensure that the Migration Act is fit for purpose. Either it's enforced properly or it's amended as necessary to ensure that we can vet and test people for these sorts of views and deny or cancel visas for people who are rabidly anti-Semitic and pose a threat to our society.
And on the day I interviewed Peter Dutton, and he immediately expressed support for an idea like that. And I think that was the problem that many of us had with the near 3,000 visas that were issued to Gazans. It wasn't just that there were necessarily national security concerns about every one of them, but had they already been indoctrinated to hate Jews, were we importing more anti-Semitism into the country? So this seeks to address some of those concerns.
And what was really disappointing at that time, when concerns were being raised about the levels of vetting, is it possible to vet that many people in such a short period of time? The response by some media commentators and some in government was to accuse those, questioning this process of racism.
Yes.
To effectively politicise the issue. But it had nothing to do with race. No one was talking about Palestinians in the West Bank. No one was talking about Arabs in the UAE or Egypt. We were talking about people living for 16 years under a fascist jihadist regime who were reared with anti-Semitism in the education system. And the Australians have a right to query who these people are, what their prevailing views are, and what threat they may pose to Australian society. These are perfectly legitimate questions. And when we start flinging around accusations of racism, it degrades the public conversation and it seeks to stifle and silence people who have a legitimate viewpoint.
Absolutely. Just finally, your views on what needs to change in terms of the cultural sector, the arts sector. What are you asking? Because this has been such a big issue. We only have about 30 seconds, but what's the outcome related to that you're asking the Prime Minister?
I'll try to be quick because it's a big issue, as you said. But I remember I was on your show a couple of years ago talking about Adelaide Writers' Week, where Louise Adler became the curator and invited on overt, rabid anti-Semites and supporters of terrorism, some of the most vicious demagogues we've seen, and they were brought to this country at the public expense. Cultural institutions should reflect the breadth of Australian culture and contribution, but too often they become places where one viewpoint is entrenched and all others are pushed out. So we need to correct that balance and preserve Australian culture.
And by the way, it's not just that pro-Israel Jews, Zionists, don't feature at writers' festivals, but, neither do News Corp journalists often, or conservatives. It's often just a representation of the left-wing view of the world. So.
That's right. And it's claimed to be about artistic expression, and yet only one form of expression is considered legitimate.
All right, Alex Ryvchin, really appreciate your incredibly hard work on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sherry.